Chapter 19, The Dutch Couple. Probably the most significant thing that happened to me during my stay in Paris, though I didn't know it at the time, was meeting this really cool Dutch couple who I guess were about in their 20s and who were staying in the same hotel as I was. And meeting those two that day would end up changing the course of my entire life, sort of similar to that travel agency visit that day in Chicago. I guess you could say that they were a boyfriend and girlfriend fashion photography team, sort of starting out, and they were putting their photography portfolio together, and they needed to take test shots of models, and I was a model working on my model portfolio, and I needed test shots for my portfolio as well, and they offered to take free test shots of me for our respective portfolios, and I was all in. So we went out and did our little production as we ran around Paris making some art. I'm so lucky to have met them, to have gotten these fabulous shots of me that you see here and that I treasure. The other thing that occurred that day, even more important than the shots themselves, is something that they said to me while we were shooting. They said, "Brad, if you ever get a chance to go to Singapore, do it. It's the coolest place." And do you know that one little sentence would change the entire course of my life? Because not long after shooting those test shots with that Dutch couple that day, I landed a big modeling job that was a cigarette ad that paid a few $1,000s. And with that money, I would end up moving to Singapore simply because of that one little statement. But again, I had the right attitude, and I can't express that enough. I was strictly go with the flow, let go, let God, so to speak. And really, it was my attitude at that time that opened the door for amazing things like Singapore to happen. I mean, I had an open mind, and I was very adventurous, so I went. And the reason that I said that ended up changing the course of my life is because I ended up falling in love with Southeast Asia and still live here today as I type these words from Thailand some 35 years later, and all because of that one little sentence that was spoken to me that day in Paris by that Dutch couple. I've come to the conclusion that life is chock full of miracles when you have the right attitude and can just let go and let God. Here are a few of the photos that we took that day in Paris sometime in 1985. Enjoy. End of chapter. Chapter 28, Singapore, Here I Come. When I got back to Paris, I guess that I was in the traveling mood and started thinking about what my Dutch friends had mentioned to me about Singapore, and that was, "Brad, if you ever get a chance to go to Singapore, do it. It's the coolest place." And right then and there, spur of the moment, I decided to go to Singapore. And so without hesitation, I went to a travel agent, bought a ticket, and away I went. Once I arrived at Changi Airport, I took a taxi to wherever in the city, got out of the cab, walked around a bit, and took practically the first room that I saw. I mean, again, since I didn't know the place anyway, one place was as good as another. It was a little guest house type of place that had small dark rooms with ceiling fans. It had a feel of the Orient to it, and hence that old Asian seed had been planted. And I say that because I am still here in Southeast Asia some 35 years later, albeit in Thailand, and from where I type these words. Singapore was just how my Dutch photographer friends described it. Totally cool, totally fascinating, totally different. I mean, if I thought that France was different, Singapore was different on steroids and had an atmosphere that was like nothing I'd ever experienced. It was a place that made me feel like I've never felt. That's what moving to the Orient did for me. I mean, Europe was different, but Asia was way different. It was a thrill, or better yet, a rush, just being there. Moving to new and strange countries was my addiction, and the more different, the better. I didn't have to do anything to feel the high except be there. And Singapore, with its totally fascinating culture and totally different feel, sure as hell did it for me. Thanks, Dutch couple. Hell, I was in Asia for Christ's sakes, and again, it was a perfect fit. The people were friendly, the city was beautiful, Miami Beach type weather, nice beaches, beautiful architecture, and best of all, very Asian. And no description of Singapore in those days would be complete if I didn't mention the world-famous Raffles Hotel. It was synonymous with Singapore. When I was there, I got to witness the original Raffles Hotel with all the ghosts of the past, and I'm grateful to have seen it when I did. It has since been refurbished, and I suppose it is now ghost-free. What a pity. Just like Nice and Paris before, I was in love with Singapore, and without question, she was my new fancy. I would eventually move to New York, then to Hong Kong, and after that, Bangkok, then Miami Beach, then to LA, then Barcelona, and back to Bangkok. and I would absolutely love living in every single one of those places, and I was one hell of a happy camper. As soon as I got to Singapore, I wasted no time getting signed by a model agency and started getting work almost immediately. That first week in Singapore, I got a part in a commercial with a bunch of other people advertising Singapore's Changi Airport, and I can still remember the jingle. You get more change at Changi, you get more change at Changi. The filming consisted of around 20 people dancing around the airport singing that jingle. That was over 30 years ago, and I remember it like it was, well, you know. You get more change at Changi, you get more change at Changi. From day one, I went out every night and sat in some food court eating the tastiest food and soaking up the tastiest atmosphere that you could imagine. You know, I try to describe it here, but again, I can't. It just wouldn't do it justice. I mean, the food that I was eating in these little outdoor food courts was as good and as different as any food that I'd ever tasted. It was served on a paper plate with zero fanfare and was dirt cheap. Singapore is a real melting pot of Chinese culture, Indian culture, and Malay culture, and each culture offered its own fantastic and unique food, so I was eating completely different cuisine every single night. Yes, I was in heaven once again. I was totally thrilled to be doing what I was doing, which was simply going out to eat and soaking it all up. Now, that's a cheap thrill if I ever had one. I spent my time going to castings for modeling and acting jobs, and when I wasn't doing that, I was checking out every single inch of Singapore, either on my skates or on foot. I also spent a lot of my days on the beach, which was dynamite. The beach was really nice and a great place to hang out, as there were restaurants and shops down there, plus all those cute Chinese girls hanging around. So it was a natural place for me to hang out, which is exactly what I did. I was getting a lot of modeling work as they were shooting lots of hotel brochures and were always looking to cast a Western businessman type. So I'd put on my Brooks Brothers suit, give them my businessman look, and more often than not, I'd get the job. I guess all that practice of acting like a stockbroker in Chicago paid off after all. Living and working in Singapore was such a blessing, and I'm so grateful that I had that opportunity. Hell, a year and a half prior, I'd never even heard of Singapore, and now here I was living there, and I was a part of it. You know, I never thought of myself as being fortunate at that time, as I was just living my life. But in retrospect, I now realize that I was living a fairy tale existence. I was living in all of these faraway, wonderful places doing work that I loved and was a part of it all. And little did I know that that trip to Singapore would plant the seed that was to shape my destiny. And all because of that Dutch couple who did some test shots of me in Paris that day. On the following page is a shot of me in Singapore with my trusty cigar, taken by a very cool German guy by the name of Ingo, whom I had met early on in Singapore. Lastly, I got the following info re the Raffles Hotel online from raffles.com, plus an old photo of the place. Raffles. When pioneering hotelier Tigran Sarkis and his three ambitious brothers opened the doors of Raffles, Singapore in December 1887, they had a daring vision to create a truly unique grand hotel with fine accommodation, excellent food, and impeccable service. Raffles Singapore quickly established itself as the only place to be, quote unquote, famous for its elegant cocktail parties, fancy dress balls, weddings, and royal ceremonies. As the book reveals, the word was out. Raffles became a sought-after destination. Many famous writers, poets, and artists have graced the hallowed halls of Raffles and found endless inspiration there since 1887. Novelist Joseph Conrad and Rudyard Kipling were some of the hotel's first guests, and British actor and playwright Noel Coward was a frequent resident for over 40 years. W. Somerset Maugham loved to sit in the shade of the hotel's fragrant Frangipani tree to edit his manuscripts, and famously quoted, "Raffles stands for all the fables of the exotic East." Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist James A. Michener wrote, "To have been young and had a room at Raffles was life at its best." To this day, Raffles' legendary writer's bar and the charming bedtime stories placed upon each guest's pillows every evening pay tribute to its rich literary history. And that, my friends, is the end of chapter. Chapter 29, I meet Ingo. Early on in Singapore, I met a German photographer by the name of Ingo. In looking back, I was always meeting photographers and getting test shots done for my portfolio, which not only improved my portfolio, but I ended up getting better at the craft. I mean, let's face it, Brad, you weren't doing test shots just to improve your portfolio. You were doing it because you liked doing it. You liked performing for the camera. But it did get me better at modeling, and it did improve my portfolio, so it did serve a purpose. Later, when I moved to Thailand, I would be shooting naked girls just for the fun of it, before I got any customers. But by doing those shoots just for myself, my photography work improved greatly, and soon thereafter, I would be selling my stuff for $3,000 a pop to Larry Flint. And I can't tell you how grateful I am to have done these test shots in Singapore with this guy. Otherwise, it would just be a memory. Anyway, as usual, he was a photographer trying to improve his portfolio, and I was doing the same as a model. Plus, let's face it, we both liked doing it. One of the true joys of all the travel that I did, was the unique and interesting people that I would meet that would come into my life. Ingo was a great guy, always smiling, and just a great guy who, like me, loved his work. And in looking at these old images, he was good at his craft. If you ever happen to read this book, Ingo, I just want to say thanks for giving me these images so that I have more than just a memory of Singapore. You're a great guy and your work is special. And if the world hasn't seen it, they will now. I actually ran into Ingo a couple of times after I left Singapore. Once in Bangkok and then again in Singapore when I returned there some years later with my Nicaraguan wife, who was going to attempt to do some modeling there. Well, without further ado, here are those fantastic images that were taken in Singapore by Mr. Ingo back in 1986. As you'll notice, some of those shots look more like movie shots than typical modeling shots. We got creative and had some fun. End of chapter.